How you doing, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Were you guys at last week of spring practice? How's it been as far as just rush on guys?
Yeah, you're certainly seeing a lot of young guys working to build in and develop. We've got a couple new faces. Really pleased with those guys and their progress, their development this spring. David Santiago working in, coming in from Air Force. Nello Lafayette coming in from Wisconsin. So two young guys, but also Tyler Gillison coming back from injury from back in the season. Really missed most of the season. So seeing a whole group of guys. James Schott, another young guy, didn't get a lot of snaps last year. So just really building the collective, floor of that room to see how high the ceiling can be.
When you looked at Nello and the film he had, were you looking more at high school, or were you looking at some of the spring game kind of practice tape he had from Wisconsin?
Yeah, it was both. Right, looking at both. He had some access to some practice stuff, and in some of his practice stuff, you saw some real edge dynamic ability. I thought as we looked at him, both from the high school, but also from some of the stuff he had there, he could really raise the pass rush level of room, which is something we know we got to do better in our pass rush. And so some of that's teaching, coaching, development. Some of it's Jimmy's and Joe's, right? And working to develop, just the natural ability. And he's a guy that he's got some edge juice to him. So excited to kind of see where he continues to grow. He hasn't played football in a couple of years. Meaning like obviously last year redshirting at Wisconsin, where you get put into scout teams and some of those things, it's a little harder for a guy there, getting into now a new system, some new teaching, whether it's schematic or drills, fundamentals to, attack some things he can still improve on. But he's coming in with a great attitude, great work ethic. He's a young man. He's got a ton of passion and energy. Really excited to see what he can add into for all of us this fall.
The Air Force people love David Santiago.
Yeah.
After 13 sessions, can you see why?
Absolutely. He's smart. He's tough. He's reliable, dependable. He played 500 snaps of Division I football last year. So the college game is not foreign to him. And the other thing is, he doesn't make many mistakes twice. Again, we're talking Nello, David, right? New system, right? There's going to be some mistakes, right? They're learning, right? That's what practice, right, is working through some of those mistakes. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He's just smart, again, reliable, dependable, tough. Really like his approach and his demeanor.
For you on the other side of your job, when you lose a guy like Jonathan Kent, who's
Sure.
such a weapon on kickoffs,
Yeah.
maybe not a lot of people talk about how those guys been responding on that in terms of, are you seeing more, I guess, is there more kicks that are returnable, or are Connington and Tariq kind of putting in the end zone?
Yeah, no, there are a couple young men. We didn't bring anybody in at that position. That tells you something about what we knew, what they could be. We knew what we had in those two young men as we watched over summer, fall work last year. We knew what we had in those two young men. We got a lot of faith, got a lot of confidence in them, and Tarek's got a big leg. He's got a big leg, right? Martin, good process. He's continuing to grow. Had a little tweak early in the fall camp last year, so but as the season went on, both those guys have just continued to grow, develop this spring, this summer, get a chance to get outside and get out of the indoor. That's a real thing for kickers, is to get outside. I think that they're just going to continue to make some great strides through the summer. And
do you envision, do you want it to be a single guy handling place kicks and kickoffs, or does it matter?
Best. I think that everything is what's best for this football team. If it's the same guy, it's the same guy. If it's a different guy that's going to give us the placement, give us the on kickoffs, give us the consistency and the leg that we need on PAT field goal, the best. So good news is we got two guys that are going to be competing all the way through preseason camp probably, but they both have the talent and ability to go perform at a high level for us.
I felt like Jonathan understood the pressure maybe on his shoulders with
Sure.
his role last year.
Yeah.
Do you think that kickers have to learn how to deal with that pressure, because it's a position where your mistakes are unmissable, right?
Yeah, correct. I think it can be either way to it, right? Sometimes the young kids, they don't know what they don't know, so they just go kick the daggone thing, right? Don't overthink the situation. Don't overthink the moment. Just do what you do on Tuesday morning as you do on Saturday night. They just, so sometimes the situation for young guys is just they don't think of, and so I think both these guys are mature young men, though, that they'll be able to handle it. They've got a good approach, good demeanor to them.
Numbers-wise, do you like where your room's at? Because you guys are kind of in your own little silo in some ways. Like,
Yeah.
How do you feel about
Yeah.
that stack of about that's all?
You're always going to look in this world, right? You can never say never. You can never say always. If dynamic players become available at wide receiver, offensive tackle, rush end, right? That's the world that we live in nowadays. But I like the group that we have. Right? I think we've got a good group of young men, good mindset, good work ethic. Back to David Santiago, who's a younger player, but he's got some veteran presence to him also because of experience and just his approach. So, but I do like where the room is, and I like the ability and the upside of them for sure.
You mentioned Gillison a little bit ago.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he could have helped you last year? And if so, like, where do you think he versus his?
Yeah, I think he's moving into that veteran experience world, right? He played at Cincinnati a couple years ago, obviously missed last year with the injury. But he's still an older guy in the room, so just maturity and some of those things. But he's got some edge rush ability too. So to answer your question, could he have added something? Possibly. We saw some things in that film from 2 years ago why we took him, and think there can be some again, we know we got to improve our pass rush. And some of that's in the individuals, and he's done some really good things against, this spring, right, really trying to rotate all of those guys. One, that we don't have a clear-cut starter, so who's going with the ones, who's going with the twos, who's going with the threes. We don't have a clear-cut starter, right? But also for them, so they're going against our one tackles, right, our two tackle, right, so that they're all getting reps and evaluated, but developed going against the best offensive linemen we have in our program as well. And we've got some good ones. We've got some good offensive linemen in our program. As Coach Mahalic is continuing to grow and develop that room.
Jones is a guy, I don't know if we've seen him, I don't know what the situation is, but is he a guy that you think can be
Yeah,
for you this year?
another guy. He played about 250 snaps last year. He's got a veteran experience.
He was adjusted too last
Yeah,
year.
and he came in last summer. It was a little. He was didn't get spring ball last year, so you're trying to learn through the summer, trying to learn through preseason camp. So another older guy that he's going into fourth year in college football. But that's where I like the mix of the room. There's some old guys, there's some young guys, right? Which is where a room should be, right? Any room positionally, so, offensive line, quarterback. So there should be some older veteran guys, and there should be younger developmental guys. Coach Smith talks about that all the time. We still want to, in this transactional world, still be a developmental program, right? And so how can we still take some of these young guys? Ty Gillison, he still needs to develop. He missed football last year, right? And last time he played, he was a young guy. So there's still development that needs to happen for all these guys.
Janet, last year, beginning of the season, you're among the nation's leaders.
Yeah.
Getting in the backfield, and there's a long stretch where you didn't.
Yeah.
And what was the biggest problem with the fall off, and how do you fix it?
Yeah, one, it is just personnel. Let's continue to attack the personnel. Now, I think the other side that, you feel like there's, the sack numbers were high. Where was our third down conversion? Are we still getting off the field, right? That still plays. Sometimes it's pressure still has the same effect as a sack. So I think our third down numbers were still, fairly decent. And we want to still continue to improve that and see that take steps forward. But I think it goes back to, it is personnel, it is schematic, and it is fundamental teaching and coaching. So it's all three of those things. We're not a team that's just going to line up and have a 4D linemen. You watch the Super Bowl, the Eagles versus the Chiefs. They just lined up 4D linemen and said sick them, right? I don't know if our roster's built that way, and I don't know if we're built schematically that way. We're just going to line up four and go say sick them. It's blitzes, it's simulated blitzes, it's overloaded blitzes, right? And that's been a focus for us this spring too, is developing the third down system and package so that there's complements and everything's building and playing off of each other. Yeah, no, that's right? Because one of the things, right, you're trying to confuse quarterbacks. Confuse quarterbacks by looks and presentation, also confuse them by who they thought, right, who versus who is in the rush.
Any specific sort of technique or things that you picked up on? Like, we're not doing this well enough.
Yeah, certainly some things, just for those guys on the edges of alignment, spacings, right, set points, right, how they're working to attack those guys and stress offensive tackles. A big phrase this spring has been stress the set, right? How can we stress the set? Really working to have those guys. We should be the more athletic players moving the more athletic direction. We're right going forward. Those guys are less athletic going backwards. Let's stress them right from that standpoint.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate